In the town of Shale in Azora, crime is on the rise as an organization known by most as the Thieves Guild has gone unchecked, stealing things from the good citizens of the town. These recent actions have put the Thieves Guild directly at odds with the stalwart defenders of Shale known as the Town Guard. Yeah, these factions are boring. Hi everyone, my name is Nate, and you are watching WASD20, a channel about tabletop RPGs and fantasy maps. If that sounds like something you're into, I would love to have you subscribe. It's free, it's easy, and it helps me out. And you can hit the bell button down below there to get notified when I post new videos. In this video, we'll be talking about how you can create more interesting and believable factions and organizations that can help bring your world to life. Before we get into that though, I want to thank my sponsor for this video, Anvil. It's an amazing tool for world builders, storytellers, and game masters to keep all of their world and story information organized and easy to share. One of the things I love about Anvil is that it provides tons of ideas and inspiration. I look at each article type and I just get inspired to create various aspects of my world that fit each. And within each article type, there are prompts that help me think through the building blocks of whatever it is I'm creating. I'll be showing some of this off in the video today with the organizations article type, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, go over to worldanvil.com and get started now. So a couple months ago, I did a video on 6 foundational questions to answer about your world. I'll put a link to that one right up at the top, but one of those questions was, who is in power in your world? Now, governments are usually major players when we answer that question, and I created a couple of political entities for my world in that video. These could be empires, countries, kingdoms, provinces, city-states, etc. I'd like to do a future video on governments and political entities as I think they're really important, but in this one we'll actually mostly be focusing on smaller or less obvious organizations. So to give you some examples of what we might be talking about here are a bunch of different faction types. Monastic orders, guilds, professional organizations, criminal organizations, shadowy networks, businesses, law enforcement, alliances, political movements, religious groups, cultural or racial groups, adventuring groups, mercenaries. I'm sure there are tons of others, so please leave your comments down below if you think I'm missing any obvious ones. These groups really make your world come alive and they add a lot of drama. They can remind your players that the world does not revolve around them and their heroic quest. Now there's obviously something to an RPG focusing on your player characters and making them feel heroic, but if you want your players to be immersed, give them a world that feels more alive than that. One way you do this is by creating groups that have conflicting interests and secrets and are making moves independent of the player characters. Now, when you're just starting off with a new campaign or you're writing a story or something, I actually recommend really limiting your factions just as you would limit your NPCs in a given game session, because it's easy to overwhelm your players with lots of new names and information, especially when you've been world building like crazy and filling out tons of stuff on World Anvil or filling up whole notebooks full of information, and then you get to the gaming table and you just want to spew it all out. Don't go introducing 3 or 4 new factions every game session. Maybe you introduce 2 or 3 fairly early on in your game or your story, and you see how they develop. You may find your players latch on to 1 or 2 of them, and others just kind of fade away, perhaps even leaving space for new ones to be introduced later on. It's also a good idea to work with your players to design factions. If you have a monk, work with that player to create their monastic order. If you have a cleric, what sort of religious group are they a part of? Does your rogue have a connection to some seedy criminal organization, or your fighter to an army or a mercenary company? You get the idea. These can be a natural starting place and a great opportunity to work on world building together with your players. This can be done during a session 0 of a campaign, or it could be something you work on with players between sessions. So when you're creating a faction, what do you need? First, I'll cover the 3 most important things in my opinion. I think you need a motivation or goal. This could be kind of a doctrine or ideology. You need methods or means, or the way they achieve their goals. And you're probably going to want a name. For coming up with motivation or goal, just think of what type of organization this is in the first place. That should usually give you your goal. On World Anvil, I also noticed something here that has a bit about public agenda, and then there's a place for secrets. So perhaps the real agenda isn't really known by all. If you're further struggling with some motivations, another great resource I've used over the years is Absolute Tabletop's Be a Better Faction Master. This book actually has a faction generator, so you could just roll for a faction motivation, or you can just look at them and get inspired or choose one of the ones they list. The PDF here is only $5, and I'll put a link to that one down below. Now, full disclosure, that is an affiliate link, and buying through that link and other books that I link to is a good way to support these videos at no extra cost to you. Now, once you have a motivation, think about the means or the methods they use. Will they be peaceful or violent? Will they break the law or work within it? Will they go to any means necessary, even if it means destroying some of their own? What specific actions do they take to accomplish their goals? If you use alignment in your games, you may want to consider that here. But personally, I don't. I just really try to be consistent with their ideology and their methods. Once you have your motivation and methods, it's time for a name. Now, I don't really have like a silver bullet if you're struggling with name ideas. You could certainly check out Fantasy Name Generator though. They've got some name generators for several types of groups. You can look under place names and other names. And by the way, if you're looking for a good cover for a criminal network, definitely look into the daycare name generator. Nothing will throw off the town guard quite like the name Little Giggles Nursery School. Huh? It's not bad, right? But once again, Be a Better Faction Master has a ton of cool ideas for faction names, and the faction name generator takes up a full 7 pages of the book with lots of great ideas for the various types of factions you might be creating. Once again, motivation, means, and name are the 3 essentials for me, but there are a lot of other things that I'm going to cover now that I think could also be good to include if you really want to bring your organizations to life. Still, don't stress out trying to fill in every aspect of your faction right away. As with many things in world building, leaving some blank space can be healthy so that you can invite your players into the world building, and it enables you to be a little bit more adaptive and flexible to cool ideas at the table. So maybe you pick 2 to 4 of these other things that you want to include for each given faction. Other things like origin. What is the history of your faction? How did it begin? And is that even known? Leadership. Who's in charge? If you need some tips for developing NPCs to be the leader of your faction, I've got a video on NPCs and I'll put a link to that one right up there. Be a Better Faction Master also has 12 faction leaders with really great descriptions and some really interesting NPCs. And related to leadership, what is the organization or structure of this faction? Are they highly centralized and connected, or are they dispersed into rather isolated cells? Is there a rigid hierarchy, or is it more democratic? Next, a sigil or symbol. This could be a cool flag or a crest or a banner, but we could also talk about more secretive kind of markers, like members of the Winter Seers always wear 3 earrings in their left ear, the middle ring being black. Or perhaps it's a signature sort of tattoo that's somewhat hidden from view. A motto or slogan is another cool thing to include, and that's a bit more formal, but you also might want to consider if there are certain phrases they use in their interactions with one another. Certain greetings, exclamations, or axioms, for example. You might also want to consider if there are certain benefits for earning the favor of one of these factions, and it could be good to actually write those things down so that you can dole them out to players when appropriate. Likewise, there might be penalties for faction disfavor. Using a scale for certain important factions that communicates a favor score and certain rewards or penalties for the group based on that favor score can actually be a good way to kind of formalize this and make sure that you're being consistent and not forgetting that there are certain benefits or penalties for their relationship to these factions. Assets are another thing you might want to consider here. World Anvil suggests that you think about silver and gold, buildings, troops, equipment, weapons, ships and horses, castles, and other fortifications. Another valuable asset could actually be public opinion. Is there a lot of public support for your faction in a certain town? That is most definitely a valuable asset. And that kind of leads us into the next bit, relationships. How does this faction relate to the other factions in the setting or the authorities? Is there animosity, cooperation, indifference? These are all good things to think about. Now, I will mention that World Anvil has a bunch of other ideas in the organization's form, including some specific to religious groups and military groups, so definitely go check it out. All right, that's all for this one, my friends. As always, I welcome your feedback, comments, or questions down below. Hopefully this video sets you on your way to better world building that creates more living and breathing settings for your games or your stories. Before we go here, I do want to thank the WASD20 patrons. These people support my work on a monthly basis. I am extremely grateful to them. You too can join with them and get some pretty cool rewards, including weekly hangouts with me and a bunch of other cool stuff. Go check it out over at patreon.com/WASD20. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed, and everybody take care. You'll see me again very soon.